So the first of the special senses that we're going to talk about is olfaction, smelling, okay? And then we'll get into a little bit with vision, and then I'd like to start labeling the eye, okay? So we'll cover much more of this in detail when we get into the lecture part, but there's a couple things I just want to hit up on. As you folks know, olfaction has to do with the first cranial nerve, okay, cranial nerve number 1. And this is one of the few nerves that we actually see constant regeneration of the olfactory neuron right in here, okay? So I just kind of want to give you just a quick overall glimpse here, all right? So first of all, first things first, I'm showing you the nasal cavity here. You guys probably don't recall, but remember the bones, the scroll-like structures, the inferior nasal conchae, the middle nasal concha, okay? Well, when there's epithelium that lines those areas, we call those turbinates there, okay? So this is all going to be lined, all right, with epithelium. But at the top here of our nasal cavity, okay, we have our cribriform plate. That's on the ethmoid bone. So the olfactory tract, olfactory bulb, and the olfactory nerves, all right, the olfactory tract and the olfactory bulb run on either side of the frontal lobe, because there's one for the left, one for the right. And they actually have to pierce down through the bone to get into the nasal cavity. They do so through the olfactory foramina here. And that's where the olfactory nerves, all right, they poke down and they reside in the superior portion of your nasal cavity. Okay, we're going to go through all the layers there. All right, so when we're looking at this picture here, okay, here's that olfactory bulb, okay, and we'll talk about the different cells and whatnot. All right, we have some glomeruli that occur here, but from the olfactory bulb is where we get our olfactory neurons. So they actually have to go through the cribriform plate here of the ethmoid bone, and then they enter here through the lamina propria. Okay, lamina propria is going to be like our basement, part of our basement membrane component, because all epithelium, right, sits on a basement membrane. So they pierce through the basement membrane, and then they're accompanied by 3 other types of cells here. So this is the olfactory neuron here, okay? And in between some of these olfactory neurons, we have supporting cells that help to give structure, provide some support to the actual neurons, much like glial cells do. And then at the base here, we see the basal cells. And those are essentially just olfactory cells in waiting, okay? They're young. They're going to develop and grow, all right? But those are the basilar cells. We also have some glands that are intermixed. It's these glands that produce mucus. And you can see here, all right, we have a layer of mucus. And in that layer of mucus, all right, our olfactory cells project what we call olfactory hairs, which are just cilia, okay? And it's these cilia that will be stimulated, all right, by these structures called these odor molecules or odorants that will stimulate the cilia to then cause a nerve action potential, okay, a nerve signal, which will engage the whole sense of olfaction, okay? So pretty much when we're looking here, all right, when we're talking about the olfactory cells, all right, one, it's a bipolar cell, all right, and this type of cell has the cell body kind of in the middle. You got one process coming off, okay? It's going to have the dendrite with the actual cilia on the one end, and then the other direction, you're going to have your axon. Okay, and that's going to head up towards the cribriform plate, towards the olfactory bulb there. Okay, so on the tip of our olfactory cell are our cilia, or what we call the olfactory hairs. Can't talk tonight. Okay, and these olfactory hairs contain what we call chemoreceptors. And chemoreceptors are a specialized type of receptor for specific chemicals. Okay, you have certain chemoreceptors in your blood, all right, that will monitor how much oxygen or carbon dioxide is floating in your bloodstream. All right. Well, in this case, all right, our chemoreceptors are specific for certain what we call odorants. All right, so certain molecules will trigger those cells to create an action potential. Okay, so unless those cells are present, right, those specific neurons will not be activated. Okay, so keep that in mind. Olfactory nerves, cranial nerve number 1. Don't forget that, please. All right, that's this guy right here. This is cranial nerve number 1. Okay. All right. So from cranial nerve number 1, all right, the olfactory neuron, all right, it will travel up and synapse here in the olfactory bulb. And you have a left and right olfactory bulb because they sit on the end of the olfactory tracts there. All right. And it's in here where the olfactory nerves will synapse with either these mitral cells or what we call these tufted cells. And those mitral and tufted cells will then carry their axons, will make up the olfactory tracts. So when we're looking here at this picture, you can see all these mitral and tufted cells here, right? And then their axons will form the olfactory tract, okay, that runs along the inferior surface of the frontal lobe there, right? And it's going to head back, all right, into, well, oops, wrong one, sorry. All right, it's going to head back, all right, towards the temporal lobe where the olfactory, the primary olfaction cortex is going to be located. But it will also, all right, stimulate the hypothalamus, the amygdala, but most importantly, it does not, this is the only general sense that does not travel through the thalamus. Okay, all of your other general senses do. Okay, it's a great question on a test. All right, so keep that in mind, please. We'll go into more detail about olfaction in lecture. All right, let's get on board here with the eye because we're actually going to start labeling the eye tonight. Okay, and our eye here, all right, when we talk about the structures of the eye, we're going to start with the external portions here. All right, so we'll label tonight the different muscles of the eye, okay, but it includes all those muscles that help to move the eye, all right, and then obviously the eyelids, all right, our eyebrows, the lacrimal gland, which is innervated by what cranial nerve, do you remember? Throw a number out there, and I'll tell you if you're right.
25.
All right. Well, if you add the 2 and the 5 together, you get 7. So that would be cranial nerve 7. So there you go. See, you'd be good at craps. All right. So cranial nerve, all right, 7 is going to innervate the lacrimal gland there, and then we have the covering. Okay. We have the conjunctiva, all right, which is the covering of the white portion of your eye. Okay, and let's not forget the eyelashes. So the functions of your eyebrows and your eyelashes are to keep things out of your eyes, right? So when you're sweating, sweat's pouring down off your forehead, your eyebrows prevent, well, somewhat, from sweat from getting into your eyes or other things from getting into your eyes. Your eyelash is the same thing. When you blink, all right, that actually helps to prevent, you know, like dust particles or anything floating in the air from entering into your eye, okay? So on those, the lashes themselves, again, it's hair, so they have nervous stimulation. So if you brush the eyelash, it will trigger the blink reflex. All right. The blink reflex is made up of cranial nerve 5 and cranial nerve 7. The cranial nerve 5 is the sensory component to it. All right. And then cranial nerve 7 is the actual blink when you close your eyes there. Okay. So you do have eyelashes on both your upper eyelid and your lower eyelid. Okay. All right, so tonight we're going to start labeling the different parts of the eye, and part of that is going to be your eyelids, which we call palpebrae. And so you have a superior palpebrae, all right, and you have an inferior palpebrae, okay? But the eyelids are not just flaps of skin, all right? They also have muscle within it, and we also have what we call the tarsal plate, all right, which is a kind of a not a dense regular connective tissue, but something in between a loose connective and a dense irregular type of connective tissue. So we classify it as a fibrous type of tissue here, okay? So this is one of the structures that you do need to know for lab, all right? When you open your eyelid, you are going to be contracting the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. And this muscle raises that superior eyelid to widen the palpebral fissure. I'll go down here. I'm not even going to try to draw it, okay? So your palpebral fissure is this whole opening here, all right, where you can actually see the eyeball, all right? So you have your superior palpebrae, or your upper eyelid, and then your inferior palpebrae, your lower eyelid, okay? And then where the upper and the lower eyelids come together, right, those are what we refer to as the commissures here. So you have the lateral commissure where they both meet together, and then you've got the medial commissure where they both come together. All right. Oh, wrong one. There we go. All right. Well, within the eyelids, okay, because the eyelids directly lay on top of the actual conjunctiva and also on the cornea, all right, we need to make sure that we lubricate, all right, those eyelids. So we have these tarsal glands, which are made up of sebaceous glands. Do you remember what type? Darn it, it's on the slide there. I was going to say, do you remember what kind of secretion it gives out? It gives out sebum. All right, and sebum is an oily discharge. All right, as where merocrine glands or sweat glands, that's mainly water. Sebum is going to be a much more viscous type of discharge, again, because it's going to help to decrease the friction in between the eyelid and the actual eye itself. All right, and then has anyone ever had one of these before, a sty? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure probably everybody's experienced one of those, and that's just when you get some sort of infection in the sebaceous gland ducts there, and then it obviously gets down into the gland, and then you're dealing with that garbage. Nobody likes a sty. Okay, so the conjunctiva. Okay, we're going to be labeling that, but it's important that you know that it's the clear, transparent lining of the eye and your eyelids and the palpebrae. Okay. It is made up of stratified columnar epithelium. That's a relatively rare type of epithelium. This is one of the few places that you will see this type of epithelium. So the conjunctiva that directly covers the eye, the white of your eye, is called the sclera. Okay, so that part of the conjunctiva we refer to as the ocular conjunctiva. All right, the part that covers the inside of your eyelid, all right, that is the palpebrae conjunctiva. And where both of those meet one another, that's called the conjunctival, excuse me, fornix. So I'll kind of show you here. Well, let's go back to this right here. All right, so the white of the eye, okay, that's the sclera. Okay, and then you've got this colored portion of your eye, that's the iris. And then the dark opening here, that's the pupil. Okay, so the conjunctiva, or the ocular conjunctiva, is going to cover the white portion here of your eye. You can't really see it here, but if you were to pull your eyelid up and out and look at the inside of your eyelid, then that would be, all right, the palpebral conjunctiva that you would be looking at. And then where they both meet, and you can kind of see it here, zoom in a little bit. All right, you can kind of see it here where they both meet up, all right, the fornix there. So here's the white portion of the eye, all right, and then you've got the actual eyelid here. That's the conjunctiva. So the fornix is right over here. It's hard to see here. Okay. And then here you can see this is the tarsal plate. This is lined with the sebaceous glands. All right, that's going to be secreting that sebum there. All right, so in this region too, in the conjunctiva, in addition to the sebaceous glands secreting from the tarsal plates, you also have goblet cells, which are going to secrete some mucus. Well, excuse me, mucin. And then when your lacrimal gland starts to secrete your tears, okay, the water from your tears will intermix with the mucin, all right, and create that mucus here to help moisten the eye, okay? Has anyone here ever had conjunctivitis? Conjunctivitis, I would say that. Conjunctivitis, pink eye? Yeah, yeah. So that's just another name, all right, for conjunctivitis is pink eye there. But an important thing that you need to understand that the conjunctiva does not cover the cornea. The cornea and the conjunctiva are separate, okay? And the cornea is going, well, cornea covers this region of the eye. So when light passes through, okay, we'll learn about the concept of refraction. That's the bending of light, okay? When light passes through the cornea, all right, that cornea is thin enough where it doesn't bend the light. It doesn't cause refraction there, which is good, all right? We don't want the light to bend any more than what the lens allows it to do, okay? All right. Speaking of tears, let's talk about the lacrimal gland and the lacrimal apparatus here, okay? So that whole system, that lacrimal apparatus, is going to include the secretion of the tears and then where it goes along your eye and then how it drains away from your eye. You've ever wondered why, if you have a good cry, I know everybody here has cried because you were a baby at one time, right? And you get a stuffy nose afterwards, because all those tears are draining down into your nose, and we're going to talk about that. So first of all, the lacrimal fluid that is excreted here, okay, mainly is going to be water, which is good because that water helps mix with the mucin, so we can get that mucus protection on the eye. But also, we'll have some sodium antibodies with this guy right here, lysozyme. Awesome stuff, okay? It's an antimicrobial enzyme, okay? And it helps to kill, right? If you think about it, your eye, well, technically, your eye is a very, very sensitive structure, especially the internal portion to it, right? So you have all these defense mechanisms to prevent penetration into the eye because technically, you've heard the term, the eye is the window to the soul. Well, in this case, the eye is actually an entry point directly to the brain, okay? And that's bad news if you have a direct entry point to the brain, because then you're setting yourself up for all sorts of stuff. All right. So what that lacrimal fluid does is, obviously we know it lubricates because our eye get watery, okay, and it moistens the eye, right? But it also helps to nourish the cornea, okay? Scratch cornea is no joke. It's very painful. If anyone's here has anyone here scratched their cornea? Have you? Did it feel good? No. Yeah, it's pretty rough. All right. So my dog did it to me once. From your dog?
Yeah.
Scratch or bite?
We scratched him in the paw.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were playing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Scratch, yeah. All right, man. All right. Note to self. I don't think I'm going to be when I play with my dog. I got to keep my glasses on. All right, so let's quickly just go through the lacrimal apparatus here, all right, for the eye. Okay, so, well, I'll start over on this, then I'll come back. So here you can see in the lateral portion, the lacrimal gland here. Okay, so the lacrimal gland is going to secrete, all right, the lacrimal fluid, which will then drain across the eye. As you blink, you will circulate and move that fluid around. But eventually it'll make itself over, okay, to the medial portion here, where you have the lacrimal, what we call the lacrimal puncta. And if you've ever looked, if you look in the mirror, right, you'll see two little holes, one on the inferior palpebrae and one on the superior area of the palpebrae. These are these little openings here, right, that the lacrimal fluid can drain into. And there's this little tube-like system, one that goes from the lower eyelid and the one from the superior eyelid, all right? Those are called the lacrimal cannuliculi, and they will drain that fluid into the lacrimal sac. Lacrimal sac sits in the lacrimal sulcus of the lacrimal bone, okay? But it's this lacrimal sac that will then take all that fluid and drain it down into your nasal lacrimal duct, which will drain the tears and whatever else is in your eye into your nose, into the nasal cavity. Then you can swallow it, or blow it out your nose or whatever. All right, but that's pretty much how it makes its way across there. Okay, so the lacrimal puncta here, all right, are these two holes that if you look close enough in the mirror, all right, you'll see them on the inferior palpebrae and the superior palpebrae. Then all of that fluid will drain into the nasal lacrimal duct and then down into your nasal cavity. And if you want, you can blow it out your nose or you can swallow it down. Okay? So this is something that is going to be, now when you start to cry, that's when you really turn up the production of the lacrimal gland. But it's going to be constantly producing enough to actually create friction there and nourish the eye there. Okay. So when we're looking at the eye, all right, I used to think that the eye was a perfect circle, but it's not, okay? Although some people that have astigmatism, their eye is going to be a little bit, for the most part, your eye is spherical. If you got astigmatism, then your eye looks like this. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't really look like that, okay? But I was told that it looks like a football by an ophthalmologist, but he says it's not quite like a football, all right? But we'll talk about astigmatism later on. But all right, your eye sits in the orbit there, okay? And it's not just clanging around in there. Much like how the spinal cord had that epidural fat that surrounded the spinal cord so it wasn't banging around in the spinal canal, your eye has, well, very orbital fat, okay? And that hangs around and it helps, again, the functions of fat, cushioning, insulation, protection, all right? So it's going to add to that. Now, we'll see it today when we label the eye, but for the most part, your eye is made up of two cavities, a posterior cavity and an anterior cavity. So, oh, there it is. Wrong one. There we go. Okay. So the posterior cavity is pretty much going to be made up of everything from the lens up to the cornea there. So all of that is going to be the anterior cavity. And then everything behind the lens back here, all right, that's going to be your posterior cavity, okay? Your posterior cavity, and it's pictured here, okay, is filled with like a gelatin, okay? It's called the vitreous humor, okay? And that stays there all the time. In the anterior cavity, you have what's called the aqueous humor, okay? And the aqueous humor is more liquid, okay? Think of the vitreous humor like a gelatin, okay? Like literally like Jello. I guess that's the best way to describe it. That's the consistency of it. Aqueous humor is going to be more fluid, all right, and your eye is constantly making it, all right. Have you ever heard of glaucoma? Glaucoma is when you get too much aqueous humor production, okay, and it starts to cause it compromises function of the eye there, all right. But normally the aqueous humor will then be drained out of the eye, but there could be issues. And if we have time, we'll talk about that. Okay, so there's three layers or tunics to the eye. Okay, we have the fibrous, all right, which is the outermost, okay, the vascular, which is the middle, and then the retina, which is the innermost, all right. That's also known as the neurological one, okay. So we're going to go through these layers. Right, and I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them because I do want to jump in and do some labeling. Just a quick picture here. Show you a little bit of the placement here of the eyes. Okay, so here are your orbits. So you've got your each eye right in here with its own optic nerve, cranial nerve number 2. Okay. Here are the three layers here. The fibrous, which is the outermost layer, is going to be made up of the sclera, which is the white of your eye, and then the cornea. All right, this transparent tissue here. All right, the vascular layer is the middle layer. We'll talk all about this. The iris, which is the colored portion of your eye. All right, the ciliary body. All right, this structure here is going to help with the shape of your lens. And then you have the choroid, which is this pinkish-like layer back here. And then finally, the innermost layer, the retina, all right, the dark area here, that is the pigmented section. And then the neural layer is going to be this white innermost portion here. And we'll talk about that more. All right. I don't want to, but I'm going to stop doing this now, just as we get to the good stuff, because we do have some labeling to do. So, and this slideshow is not that long, and I've got 3 more classes to go over with you. All right, let's jump into the labeling here real fast. All right, this is going to be for the eye now. Okay. So the eyelids, we call those palpebrae. So the upper eyelid is going to be the superior palpebrae. All right, so hence the bottom eyelid right below, there's the inferior palpebrae. All right, and they offer limited protection to the eye. Obviously, it's not like if I were to close my eye before you punched me in the eye, that it wouldn't hurt my eye. But I'm just saying it helps to keep foreign matter out of the eyes and whatnot. Now, where the 2 palpebrae come together, all right, on the lateral side, or actually the medial side here, this is called the medial canthus. That's when the inferior and the superior palpebrae meet up with one another. And then we have the lateral canthus. That's going to be on the lateral portion here. All right. So now we're going to go and review, all right, the conjunctiva. So that is the white, the white of the eye is called the sclera. The conjunctiva, which is a transparent covering that covers the sclera, that is known as the ocular conjunctiva. Okay, it's directly on the white portion there. All right, and then we flip and look at the inside. All right, this white, this pinkish structure right there, that is the palpebral conjunctiva. That's the part of the conjunctiva that will line the inside, okay, of the eyelid. And there's one thing that's missing here. These structures right there, that's referred to as the tarsal plate. You want to label that. I don't have a slide for that. Okay, the tarsal plate. And you can see here, all right, there's our lacrimal gland, and the lacrimal gland is always on the lateral portion of the eye. So it kind of gives you a sense, if you're looking at the inside of the eye, if you're looking at, if you see the lacrimal gland, then you know which is the medial portion and which is the lateral portion. All right, this little space-like structure here in the medial portion here where you get those eye boogers, okay, little crusties when you wake up in the morning, that is called the lacrimal caruncle. I call it the caruncle, but it's caruncle. All right, that's this right here, the lacrimal caruncle. All right, so you know when we were talking about the lacrimal gland produces your tears and they move across as you blink, and then they're going to get drained out. All right, and if you look close here, you can see these little black openings here. All right, those are the puncta. Okay, and they're the openings to these structures here. All right, the superior lacrimal cannuliculi or canal, either or is fine. That's that tube-like structure where all that lacrimal fluid is going to drain. All right, so you got one on top. That's the superior lacrimal canal or cannuliculi. And then you got one below it. That's the inferior lacrimal canal or cannuliculi. and both of those, okay, both of those will drain into the lacrimal sac, okay? Right there. The black holes were called, I'll type it out for you, puncta. You got it. That is not one of the things that you're required for labeling, but you should know it. Yeah. All right, and then the lacrimal sac drains finally into the nasolacrimal duct, which will eventually drain your tears and whatever stuff that was in your eye into your nose, into your nasal cavity. Thank God. Because if that didn't drain into your nose and then, like, say it drained into the side of your ear or out the neck or whatever, that'd be weird, you know? No one can see then what's going on in there. That's true. It'd be weird. Well, yeah, it's true. I guess we'd just be so used to it. We just start talking to somebody and they just start getting like this ooze coming out or whatever. What is that?
So it's in your ear too, like that was almost like a weird, like it costs like water in your ears almost. That's just kind of weird.
Yeah. I wouldn't want it in my ear. I don't know where. I'm happy with where it is. All right. So you have a muscle above. Yeah, this is the most superficial muscle and the most superior eye muscle, the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. This is the muscle that helps to open up your eyelid. Okay. All right. This is cranial nerve number 3 that innervates this. You don't need to know that though. I'm just threw it out there. I mean, you should know, but you don't have to write it down. All right, levator palpebrae superioris, right here. All right, you don't have this in your manual, but this is just another angle where you can see it. All right, here's the lacrimal gland. Here's the superior palpebra. All right, and here is the most superficial external or extrinsic eye muscle. Okay. All right, and you can see it. You do have this in your book. And this is the lateral view here. So that's this top muscle here. All right, levator palpebrae superioris. Right below it, okay, is another muscle, all right, and it attaches to the top portion of the eye, and that's called the superior rectus muscle. So if we were looking at your eye straight on like so, here's your iris, here's the pupil, all right, you've got a muscle on the top here, a muscle on the inside by your nose, a muscle directly underneath, and then a muscle on the lateral portion by your ear, okay? So your top muscle, that's the superior rectus muscle. And then above that, all right, it sits on top of that, that's levator palpebrae superioris, okay? So now the bottom one is called the inferior rectus. The one on the inside by your nose is called medial rectus. And then the one on the by your ear is lateral rectus. So here's a picture of inferior rectus. It's down here. It disappears into the orbit here, but it's this muscle right down here. All right. Here's a view of it where we've cut away the superior rectus and the levator labii superioris. This, label that. That's cranial nerve number 2, optic nerve. All right, the inferior rectus is right below it. You can see it on this other model here. This is the cranial nerve 2, optic nerve. All right, you do have this model, okay? That's the medial rectus muscle. That's going to be closest to your nose, obviously. Then the muscle on the same side as your lacrimal gland, lateral rectus. Now, in your eye, all right, I told you about you have the 4 rectus muscles. But then you have 2 others. And those are like in the corners. You got this one here, that's called superior oblique. And then you got another one here on the inside, that's called the inferior oblique. Okay, and the superior oblique causes you to look down and out. Okay, so here's the picture of the superior oblique muscle. Superior oblique muscle is innervated by the trochlea nerve. That's going to be cranial nerve number 4. Okay. And then the next muscle, the one down in the corner, you can kind of see it down here. That's inferior oblique. So there's an equation that we've used to explain what innervates the muscles. LR6, SO4 over 3. That means lateral rectus is innervated by cranial nerve number 6, which is the abducens nerve. Superior oblique is innervated by cranial nerve number 4, which is the trochlear nerve. And then all the remaining extrinsic eye muscles are innervated by ocular motor. So that includes medial rectus, superior rectus, inferior oblique, and levator palpebrae superioris. Okay? So there's a quick example of that. Cool? All right, let's get into the layers here of the eye now. All right, remember I told you there was 3 walls or layers to the eye. The outermost layer is the fibrous tunic, which is made up of I'm going to show you each one individually. This is just showing you what the fibrous tunic is made up of and what's included in the fibrous tunic. All right, so the fibrous tunic, the outermost layer, is made up of the cornea and the sclera. So here's the sclera, the white portion of the eye. All right, and then directly over the iris, that transparent tissue is referred to as the cornea. So if you see a true or false question on the test that says that the cornea refracts light, it does not. Okay? Now, for our purposes, let me rephrase that, because it's impossible for it not to reflect light, but it doesn't refract light enough or manipulate the light that's entering into your eye that affects the image. Okay, not like the lens does.
What was the slide?
This one here, the fibrous tunic, or yeah, that's this one. Yeah, the fibrous tunic one. All right, now we're going to go into the second layer, or the middle layer. Okay, that's the vascular tunic. All right, it's made up. We'll go through all these structures. Don't worry, but you want to know what the vascular tunic is made up of. All right, the iris and the pupil. Okay, the ciliary body, which we'll label on the inside, And then the suspensory ligaments are the ligaments that attach the ciliary body to the lens of the eye, because the ciliary body is like muscle tissue. So when it contracts and relaxes, it's going to manipulate the shape of the lens, and that will alter the how much light is bent, allowing you to focus on things. Okay? And then the choroid is this, I don't know what color that is, purplish brown or whatever. That's with all these blood vessels in it. That's the choroid. We'll go through all these individually. Let's start off with this. Here's the iris. It's the colored portion of your eye. Okay? What gives the iris its color? It's blue or brown or hazel or whatever, or pink if you're an albino. Yeah, that's right, melanin. Yep. That was the vascular tunic. Think blood vessel, vascular. Okay, so that's the iris. You can see it here on this model. You got it. That's why an albino, all right, their iris is pink because there's no melanin. Okay? I've always wondered why pink though. It's just how it appears without the melanin. Who here has blue eyes? Anybody here have blue eyes? Nobody? Mixture? You know that people with blue eyes are more sensitive to sunlight. So, interesting fact. There's the pupil, opening to the eye. Much like on a camera, the aperture opening, for those of you that are into photography. All right, here you can see it on this model. It's the pupil. So directly behind the pupil is the lens of your eye. So if you wear glasses or contacts, they share a similar function. They bend light to focus it. Okay? We'll go through all that when we do chapter 16. Okay? Now, unfortunately, you don't have this slide here. So the ciliary body, and I'm going to show you on this other slide, the ciliary body. Let me zoom in here. Okay, the ciliary body is pretty much this pinkish material here and here. It's not the best, and I don't know why it's not in your book. All right, but the ciliary body, okay, hangs down. Okay, and it almost acts, it's what these ligaments are attached onto. These ligaments attach onto the lens of your eye. They're referred to as the suspensory ligaments. And they can change the shape of the lens of your eye. They can make it much thinner, or they can make it big and fat. Okay, and that will affect how much bending of light as it's entering into your eye. Okay, so these little suspensory ligaments you can see attached from the ciliary body onto the lens of your eye. There's a lens right there. So on this slide here, you can kind of see, well, they cut the suspensory ligament. I'll look for further, but that was one of my gripes, is that we don't have that. All right, choroid. Okay, it's not pointing to the blood vessel, it's pointing to that brownish background there, okay? That's the choroid. All right, that's it for the vascular layer. Let's jump in and check out the innermost layer, the neural layer. Okay, it's made up of the retina, the macula luta, the fovea centralis, and the optic disc. We'll go through all that. Okay. All right, so the first part of the neural layer that I mentioned is the retina. That's this pinkish whole layer here. Everything that's pink or whatever color that it looks like to you, that's the retina. So when you go to see your doctor and they look into your eye with the ophthalmoscope, they're looking at the retina there. Now in this model, it looks more tannish. All right, that's the retina. And then I think you have this picture. Do you have this picture in your book? That's an actual picture of the ophthalmoscope. All right, no big deal. But that's what it looks like when they're looking in your eye. Okay, so the next structure that we're going to look at is right here. There's two structures. This little dot here, okay, and then there's this circular structure around that dot. We're going to label both of those structures, okay? So the first one, this is the macula luta and the fovea centralis. I'll show you each one. In the macula luta is that bigger circular structure here. And then at the center of it, it looks like it's yellow. That's the fovea centralis. That is ideally, when you're looking at something, you want the image of whatever that something is to go right to that little dot. That is where your sharpest vision in your eye is located. Okay? So here, this is showing you the macula luta. All right, that circle is showing you the macula luta. All right, so on what is macular degeneration? That's essentially, I mean, if you look at the term, macular degeneration is when you see that specific structure for whatever reason, it could be an infection, where the cells there start to decompose and you start to lose your vision. It's actually, it can be sudden or it can be over time. But that whole macula luta, it just starts to degenerate. So that on yours, that's the macula luta where I'm drawing. Right there. All right, and then the fovea centralis is that little black dot, or whatever color dot, right in the center there. You guys had that labeled, that it's yellow on yours, right? Or white, I don't know how it looks like. It's been copied so many times. All right, macula luta, right, fovea centralis. Then you got this structure here called the optic disc. Okay, that's where your optic, well, all the neurons, all right, will move towards the optic disc from all over the retina. They'll all converge on that point, along with all the blood vessels and whatnot will converge on that point, and they exit out of the eye through the optic nerve, okay? And the optic artery and the optic vein are back in there too, okay? But there's no visual receptors in this area here, okay? So here it is on yours, that white disc structure. That's the optic disc. And then you can see it also on that model. All right. So I told you there was two cavities in the eye. You had the anterior cavity and the posterior cavity, all right? All of this, okay, well, the lens would be here, okay? So it's all of this whole area. That's the posterior cavity, okay? And it's filled with that jello, okay? Which is what we call the vitreous humor, okay? Called the vitreous humor, and you've got a picture of it in your manual there, okay? This guy right here is supposed to be the vitreous humor, okay? Which is located in the posterior cavity. When I was in med school, we were dissecting, for whatever reason, I don't know why they wouldn't let us dissect, excuse me, the human eyeballs, so we dissected cow eyeballs, which are very familiar, similar to the human eyeballs in terms of composition. So, all right, vitreous humor. Then we have our anterior cavity, which is, again, if the lens was here, okay, it would pretty much be from the front of the lens up to the cornea here. That's the anterior cavity. And the anterior cavity has that aqueous humor. All right? It's not as thick and gooey as the vitreous humor, right? It's more like water consistency. And it flows all through that area there. All right, there's two parts, all right, or two sections to the anterior cavity, okay? There's the anterior and posterior chamber, okay? So again, well, let's skip that. Okay, so you have the anterior chamber, okay, which goes from the iris here up to the cornea. And then just behind that is going to be the posterior chamber. Okay, so this region here, and then if we have time, we'll talk about glaucoma and all that, and how it affects its circulation through those areas. All right, yo, that's it for the eye. Well, for the labeling of the eye. So all those structures you do need to know for the